Let's do it.
Right, Colin, we are here, we are live. Thank you for being here. Everybody, today we are chatting about the article that Colin and I did together. And Colin is a dear friend, he's the managing director of Eagle Certification Group. And well, we have worked in the article. We were also, he also did a brief interview during GFSI conference with me. But well, Colin, let's talk a little bit about you, about your journey, your food safety journey. Can you briefly tell us what was your journey until you reached your current position?
Sure. So thanks for the introduction, Nuno. Good to talk to you today. Quite excited about going out live. So yeah, for me, I didn't follow a traditional path with food safety that maybe a lot of other food safety professionals took. I started with Nestle 22 years ago, back in 1999, and I started as a process analyst in manufacturing and quality. So with that, I came from a background, my education background is computer and business analysis, and I specialized in quality control, business process management. I did a dissertation around ISO 9001 with a orthopedic shoe manufacturer. So I got into quality management systems, and then that took me into Nestle, into quality. So from there, I grew up in Nestle, and I maybe for the first 10 years of my career, I moved into the quality management area, a lot around business excellence, a lot around systems, implementation that was supporting food safety practices. So with that, I managed to get a lot of experience, a lot of close working relationships with our corporate quality folks, and a lot of business excellence was alignment with our instructions, procedures, and how we did food safety. So potentially then I had a different perspective to others as I then graduated, I would say graduated into a food safety career. So what I wanted to do is move out of a business excellence role into an operations role. And that obviously had food safety responsibilities. So with my background in quality and not food safety, then I had to bridge the gap. And then I did various distance learning programs for food safety, for food technology, lead auditor classes for 9001, for FSSC 22000, and so on. And then I was then in a regional role for North and South America that we had to make sure that we had consistency in our management systems across our factories, regional labs, distribution centers, head offices for food safety and quality. So with that, after being in that role for around 5 years, my final role was the director for supply chain for Nestle USA, looking after over 2,000 ingredient and packaging suppliers for food safety and quality. So I think it's not a traditional route, but it was one I think that adds value to a big food safety team because I sometimes bring in a different perspective. I'm very much around process, around systems, around people, and add that to implementing things like food safety management systems. I think that was a nice compliment, and I certainly enjoyed the journey at Nestle. And then about 18 months ago, I decided to take a change of career path. I'm very passionate about these management systems that I've been implementing. I'd seen Nestle achieve great success, huge improvement by implementing food safety management systems. And I wanted to come into the certification world, so to help other organizations beyond Nestle, so help the food industry in a wider capacity. And coming into a certification body, that's allowed me to do that. And in addition, now I have in a voluntary role at the IAF, which is for the Food Working Group. So what I see now is having a bigger influence and actually trying to help the sector and not just a big corporation. So it's been quite a journey, and I've really enjoyed it so far.
Yes, thank you, Colin. Well, really a large experience in food safety, and well, we came across in a training, I believe, that you joined it, and well, we have been talking since then, and then we did this project, right? That it's what will bring us together again today. That is and let me share with everybody here. That is the 10 things you should know from the new ISO 22000 handbook, and let me. Well, why did we did this article, this ebook? Well, because I think this was something that we were looking for, right? And we were waiting for this guidance from ISO to the new 2018 version. And people were looking for some guidance, and guidance is always important, right? As we say here in the article and the ebook, we know this is how we can do, right? It's not only the requirements, but also how people can help and assistance to people to implement the requirements. That was our purpose, right?
Yes, very much so, Nuno. I think we've described it as the requirements in a standard are often referred to as the what is required, and guidance is the how to implement, the consistency. And I think what we find is with certain management systems and food safety management systems, they can be open to interpretation because they're designed to be broad, they're designed to fit any organizational sector within food and any organizational size. So what I've seen over the years is if you just give a standard, even within the same organization, to multiple different factories, there's going to be different interpretations about how the system is designed in terms of what documentation is needed, what are the day-to-day activities, and so on. So the guidance, the practical advice is really key. So you have a good common interpretation. And if you can get behind that common interpretation, that really drives consistency of, did you implement the system right? Are you getting the most out of that system? Is there a value add? And ultimately, when we look at certification, we have to go much further than just a certificate on the wall to say you're compliant to a system. It has to be a philosophy. It has to be a way of working within your organization. And I think the guidance really helps. It's a key part, and it really helps organizations do that.
Right, and I'm scrolling here the article. Well, we did choose 10 things, but it could be more, right? We have to do I remember the first draft, I sent you 20 or 25, I don't know. I just was picking up and see, well, what can we talk about? After all, at the end, we have to choose 10. And well, if people that are watching still haven't got this ebook or this article, I will share with you how you can do this after this talk. But we have chosen to talk about organizational risks management, right? Also internal and internal issues. Interested parties was point number 3. We have commitment and leadership of top management. This is always important, right? Then we have here risk, opportunities, and objectives. Number 6 is food safety policy. Number 7 is externally developed elements of the food safety management systems. We have also number 8, management of documented information. You choose flow diagrams for the 9th, and 10 is verifications. So these are really comprehensive. Well, we could talk about a lot more, but these were the 10 that we choose. And from these 10 things that we choose, do you have one that you like to emphasize today in this talk? A special one?
Sure, Nuno. Like you said, we had 25 topics. A food safety management system is a real complicated set of components, but probably the one that jumps out for me is leadership. It's really critical, especially when a food safety management system. What we see in the revision from ISO 2005, the ISO 22000 initial version, and the new one, the new publication, ISO 22000 2018, is much more emphasis was placed on leadership. In addition to that, what we saw is ISO move away from the terminology of management commitment to the word in leadership. And I think that's key. And it's only when I started looking into this, when they made that move, that I really understood and appreciated what ISO were trying to do. Because there's a difference. And as we've mentioned in the article, when you look at management commitment, management is really about management of processes, which is very important. But when you bring in leadership, and the word in leadership, it's a very subtle change. But basically, leadership is about driving behaviors. So management is management of processes. Leadership is about driving behaviors. And then we have this debate within the food industry about food safety culture. How do we do it? How do we drive it? How do we measure it? How do we audit it? But a lot of it really comes back down to leadership. And I've seen this within organizations that strong leadership, when they really own the food safety management system, they start driving the right behaviors. And then there's a trickle down effect right down to the shop floor. And what do I mean by that is there's subtle differences. Leadership have to communicate the quality policy. That doesn't come from the factory quality manager. If there is a problem, if there is an issue, so let's just say that there's an observation that the hand washing stations, people are not observing the full hand washing practices. It sounds simple, But if the factory quality manager went around and started updating people and sending out memos to say, hey, we need to revise how we do hand washing in the hand washing stations, that sends the wrong message. It needs to be the factory manager. He or she at the top of the organization and the leadership team need to demonstrate those behaviors. And that goes anything from, as I mentioned, hand washing, hair control, and other practices. If there are problems and food safety failures, there has to be, as part of the root cause and corrective action, there has to be someone from leadership beyond, outside of the food safety team. And when you start seeing people engaged in problem solving, being engaged in providing the right resources, being engaged in the communication and setting the right behaviors, then ultimately the leadership take charge. And then the final point I'd like to say about leadership is when the leadership fully understand the food safety management system, they're the guys that actually start allocating the roles and responsibilities. They're in charge about who does what. And when leadership understand it, they actually see the organization cross-functionally. The food safety team will see the organization more like a silo in terms of the function that they're based in. So it's a very different perspective. And ultimately, what we've seen within successful food safety management systems is logistics own goods inwards. It's quality input to that process. It's manufacturing that own the in-process steps within manufacturing. It's not quality. They will provide input into that. It's procurement that own the supply relationship. It's quality that have input into that. And I can give a million more examples, but ultimately that's what we're really looking at is leadership, understanding who does what, and take that leadership role with driving the behaviors in the organization.
Right. So on my side, and maybe I can share again the article here. Well, I would like also to emphasize this: it's not by chance that we choose organizational risks, internal and external issues, and interested parties as the first three, because this is really new. Okay, these ones are really new, and these ones were introduced in this version to increase the alignment that ISO 22000 now has with other ISO management systems like ISO 9001 and 14001. This is really, well, on the bad news is this is new and people have to learn how to do this. But the good news is that now is even easier if you have a food safety management system and you want to join or include also a quality management or environmental management system. You can do that on your much more easier than before with this pretty much well aligned food safety management system that we have now. Okay, so if I have a suggestion, take a closer look to these first 3 points of the article of the book, because they are really giving examples how people can, and it is a good help if people is doing this for the first time. The guidance provides a good help how you can do that. Right. So, Colin, we have already talked briefly of what we have written, but what about what we didn't written, what we didn't talk about, what we didn't include in this article and this ebook? Anything you'd like to share that we left out? And well, we have now an opportunity to share about it.
Yeah, it's a good question, Nuno, and I think that the handbook provides a lot of practical guidance. But one of the other key points I wanted to share with ISO 22000 is that it is an outcome-focused system. So essentially, what I mean by that, it's all about defining your expected outcomes. And when you understand that, that allows you to go very broad in terms of how you implement a system, how you sustain that system, how you audit that system, because you start asking some key questions. And the very simple question is, what is the expected outcome of your food safety management system? The expected outcome is safe food for the consumer. It could be some form of continual improvement, dependent on what your organization is working on or manufacturing. It could be that it is to ensure that there are no regulatory, statutory, or regulatory failures. It could be that you fully understand the customer requirements. So there's a lot of different things in terms of an expected outcome. So that's a very key question to ask for your organization. What do you want out of this system? When you understand the expected output, then you start to measure it. And that's critical. And by measuring it, you then ask the key question is to say, okay, then how do we demonstrate that we are improving with our implementation of our management system? How do we continue to make safe food and so forth? And then ultimately, as we've mentioned in the article, when you start looking at expected outcomes, if you define is what is your output, what is your outcome, that is then understanding what is the context of the organization. As we mentioned before, what are the interested parties? What are the external, internal issues? And this again comes back to my point about leadership, because it's leadership that have to answer some of these very high level questions. And leadership, and by answering that is the key point, that it enables ownership. If you put that question in front of leadership, they have to answer it, and then effectively they own that, because once they own it, they define the measures, and then they have to get behind to make sure that expected outcome is delivered on a consistent basis.
Right. Well, and Colin, another thing that's outside our article, and well, this is something that people is always asking for, is regarding the categorization, management, and monitoring of control measures. Okay, this has always been tricky since the beginning, and we didn't include nothing about it. But well, people have in the handbook, they have their information to help them. Please don't expect to have the magic solution there, because you won't find it. But there are good support there to explain you what is expected to be done. But at the end of the day, we still have these new assessments that we have, the 2 levels assessments that ISO now has, not only the hazard assessment, but also the control measure assessment. We have some specific questions regarding to be a CCP, they have to follow some criteria. So we won't find there in the handbook a magic solution that we can follow and make all your problems go away when you have to decide if this is some control measure is going to be managed as OPRP or CCP. But it has there some guidance to help you. I would like to quote something that is there that is interesting, and I will let you think about this, because inside the handbook you have there on task 5.6 on task 5.7, sorry, you have there a sentence that I would like to share with everybody. One approach is to first determine which of the control measures identified are to be managed as CCP. Those remaining must be categorized as OPRP. And then they have a figure to summarize the relationship between OPRPs and CCPs, right? So this is an approach, a suggestion. Of course, remember, the handbook is not a requirement, it's a guidance. What you have to follow is what is inside the standard. But nevertheless, this is a suggestion approach that ISO has inside the handbook. Well, you have to see and read it there, but I think it's an interesting suggestion. And well, I think it's time that we are moving on, and well, moving to finish this talk about our article. Colin, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Share with us where we can find you, where it's easier to interact with you. How can we see what you are doing in our days?
Sure, Nuno. So thanks very much. So I work, as Nuno mentioned, I work for Eagle Certification Group. You can email me at colin.christmas@eaglecertificationgroup.com. If you can't remember that email address, if you search for me on LinkedIn and put in Eagle or Nestle, I will typically pop up, and I'm more than happy to accept a LinkedIn request and continue the discussion.
Okay, awesome. Great, Colin. It was a really pleasure to have here. The goal was, well, to watch and show a little bit about our work we did together. I think people now have another view of the article and the book. Of course, we are going to share with everybody in the comments of this video how you can see the article or even get your own PDF of the ebook. But before I let you go, I would like to ask you a question that I'm asking everybody that I can. So my final question for you, Colin, will be: if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing in food safety, what would you change, or what would you ask for?
It's a good question. I'm glad you gave me that question yesterday, so it gave me some time to think about it. But when I look at the most important thing, just to put things into perspective about safe food is if we look at our population today, it's about 9.8 billion people on this planet. In the next 30 years, we're going to go to about 9.9 billion people. That's an awful lot of people to feed on this planet and to make sure that the food is safe. So the responsibility for food safety professionals today and industry leaders and thought leaders, they have to think about that. Are the current systems in place today going to be effective when we have to scale to feed another 2 more billion people at least on the planet in the next 30 years? And ultimately, the conclusions I've come to is I don't think the systems in place today are, quite frankly, are going to cut it in the future. And this is where I think that regulators need to play a much more collaborative approach. So if I had a magic wand, what I've seen today is there's some great work by food safety regulators at a national level. I had the pleasure to work very closely with the FDA on FSMA rules, working in the US for the last 5 years. And I really appreciate and value the work that they've done in terms of defining the rules around the Food Safety Modernization Act. But it's just one pocket. And we see small amounts of collaboration. The US are collaborating closely with Mexico and so on. But I think the magic wand I would like to do is, if possible, is to recommend regulators to create an international food safety regulator forum. It's not beyond regulators to do this. One example is we've seen this in the medical devices industry. There's something called the IMDRF, the International Medical Devices Regulators Forum. They've created something called MDSAP, which is a medical device single audit program based on ISO 13485. So we know it's possible with regulators. FDA are involved in that medical devices regulator forum. So I think we need something very similar for regulators to collaborate more on an international level. And if regulators really have a common language and a common collaboration model, that would really, really drive an effective food safety systems for industry as well. That would be the knock-on effect. And ultimately, what do we see is probably food is the most traded commodity internationally. So regulators will always struggle if they think domestically. They need to collaborate more, and that will be my magic wand, is to have a food safety international forum for regulators.
Right, Colin, that's great. And remember, it's a magic wand, so everything is possible, right?
Yeah.
You ask if that's possible, it's magic. Colin, it was as always a pleasure to talk with you, and thank you for taking the time to come here again. And hopefully people now have a little bit more knowledge about the article, about the ebook, and hopefully if they want, they can always go to ISO and get the full handbook, right? So Colin, thank you so much for being here, and see you soon.
Thanks, Nuno. Pleasure to talk to you today.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.